Alright, this is going to be the start of my 9-part series of how to monetize your beekeeping business. In this one, we're going to look at the first really obvious basic one. So it's not going to be super long or very detailed. The first obvious thing to do when you're starting up a beekeeping business or when you have a few hives is to sell honey. Now, in Michigan, you don't really need any special permits or anything special to sell to your friends and family or at local farmers markets. Now, you'll definitely want to check and see if there's any local city or township rules, but in terms of the state rules, there's nothing specific. Once you start selling to local farmers markets that have consistent shops like Ken's, I believe, is one local to my area. Or once you start getting a little bit bigger commercially, like for Horrocks or Meijer, Walmart, Kroger's, Aldi's, if you are able to get a deal with any of those people, they may have specific rules for you that they would like for you to do in your labeling. And at that point, you also need, you'll have to check the exact wording, I'm paraphrasing here, but you will need to label it as, like where it came from, that it's not a commercial, you're not a commercial enterprise, but that you're following the local rules and everything. You have to have the weight on it or the ounces. A lot of people will sell it either by the pound or by the ounce, so it kind of depends on what containers you really feel comfortable using. I know the honey bear shaped containers are usually by ounce, whereas your mason jar containers are usually by weight. With the honey though, you can branch off a little bit. Some things that I've done are I've used it to make lollipops or suckers. I've used it to make stir sticks. You can find various recipes to do that, where it actually dissolves in your tea or coffee as you stir, or it will dissolve in milk, but it does take quite a bit longer because it's a cold liquid. You can make cough drops and do various medicinal things with it. Honey, if it's harvested at the right percentage, will last pretty much forever as long as it's preserved right. You hear stories, well, a lot of kids, you're usually taught a story about how they found honey in the pyramids and it was like 3,000 years old or whatever, and it was still good. As long as it's sealed and it was harvested at the right time, it's fine. When you do harvest honey, you definitely want to wait until a good indicator is if the frame is completely capped. If it's capped, that means it's to the bee's satisfaction dried enough to be considered honey. If you have a refractometer, like what I have, is very useful. It will give you the percentage of water in your honey. Under 20% is okay. Under 17% is pretty good. And under 15 is amazing for our area, for Michigan at least. And by most standards, that's pretty darn good. So a hydrometer is really the only consistent way to be able to check that without going to a lab. And they're you can get them fairly affordably online. I know Amazon has a few different models and a few other companies have some models as well. Those are a few kind of quick things that you can do with the first way to monetize your bees. And I don't recommend, if you're going to harvest honey, if it's your first year, leave as much as possible for the bees. If your hive has one, for each brood box, I would recommend a brood box to weigh at least about 80 pounds or so. That would be really, really good going into winter. If we're getting close to winter and you're a little bit worried, I would definitely recommend supplemental feeding. A protein mix, a pollen patty mix, and a sugar syrup for sure. Um, for honey supers, that's kind of depends on your area. If you've gone through a few cycles, then you would be more confident, I would think, in harvesting a certain amount. You don't want to over harvest your first year because then, if the winter turns out to be mild again, then a lot of colonies will starve out in the spring before anything really starts to bloom because they're more active in the winter, so they go through more food. So you definitely want to watch that, especially your first year. But after that, you should be okay. You should have a better idea. The next stage is going to be talking about wax production and what you can do with that, and then we will go on from there. Thank you, guys.